Okay, so let's dive in. We've got these two really contrasting stories, right, to kick things off.
Yeah, polar opposites almost. One guy, brilliant, builds this huge thing.
$1 billion empire.
Yeah.
Driven, but there was something missing underneath.
Right, that ability to handle his own emotions or understand others, and it cost him big time.
In a huge public moment, it all just imploded.
Yeah.
Piece of anger, not a lack of smarts.
Exactly. And then you've got the other person, maybe seemed, I don't know, less obviously brilliant on the surface.
Yeah, quieter perhaps, but really tuned in, emotionally aware.
Uh-huh. And they build this global brand based on trust, resilience, that kind of calm strength.
People connected with that. It wasn't just about the genius, it was the human element, the grace under pressure.
The big question is, what was the difference maker there between those two paths?
Well, that's what we're digging into today, isn't it? It boils down to emotional intelligence, EQ.
That's the core of it. You can't really navigate the complexities, build anything meaningful if you're ignoring or mishandling these powerful emotional forces inside you and around you.
Right. And what's really striking is, well, you don't usually get taught this stuff in school, do you? It's not on the report card.
Definitely not. It's often overlooked.
But our sources, they're pretty clear. They point to EQ as maybe the #1 predictor of success, like across the board leadership, relationships.
Even just finding that inner peace, that sense of well-being, it's fundamental.
Exactly. And that's our goal for you in this deep dive. We want to go beyond just, defining EQ.
We want to get into what it actually means to live it, to make it real.
Yeah, we've looked at the sources and pulled out things you can actually use, insights, tools, stuff you can apply starting like now.
Because knowing the concept is one thing, but weaving it into how you actually experience the world, that's the real work and the real reward.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first big idea from the material is just how much emotions shape everything, even when we think we're being purely logical.
Yeah, it's this idea that emotions kind of run the world, often invisibly. The sources give some pretty stark examples.
Like wars started over ego, marriages ending because of insecurity, careers blowing up over outbursts.
Exactly. It makes you realize how often these huge events, or deeply personal ones, are driven by feelings that maybe weren't understood or managed well.
And it hammers home that point.
Yeah.
It's rarely just the event itself. It's almost always our emotional response to it that dictates the outcome.
Right. And the source material really challenges that idea of pure logic driving decisions. It suggests logic often comes after the emotional decision.
Like we feel something, decide based on that feeling, and then our brain builds the logical case for it.
Pretty much. We rationalize the emotional choice, which means, if you want real mastery in life, you've got to start with mastering your emotional world. It's foundational.
Okay, so if they're that powerful, what are emotions, scientifically speaking? The sources go beyond just, like, feelings, right?
They do. They frame emotions as biological signals, not just fuzzy psychological stuff, but actual signals from our brain and body.
Signals for what purpose?
Well, primarily for response, for survival, for adapting to whatever life throws at us. They're deeply embedded biological tools.
And where do these signals come from? The source breaks it down, doesn't it? Into a few key areas.
Yeah, 3 main sources are highlighted. First, the body itself. Think about, your heart rate changing, hormones flooding your system, those physical sensations.
Like your chest tightening with anxiety.
Yeah.
Or your stomach churning when you're embarrassed.
Yeah.
That gut feeling stuff.
Exactly that stuff. That's not a side effect. It's part of the emotional signal. The second source is our thoughts.
Ah, the interpretation piece. How we make sense of things.
Precisely. The meaning we assign to an event heavily influences the emotion we feel. Same event, different interpretation, different emotion.
Makes sense. And the third source?
Our past. All those accumulated experiences, any trauma we've been through, our memories, they all color our present emotional responses. They create patterns.
Right. So it's body, thoughts, and past all feeding into how we feel right now.
And the source really emphasizes that the body doesn't just feel emotions. It kind of stores them too. That tightness, that tension, it can linger.
Which reinforces that idea of EQ being a whole body practice, not just mental gymnastics.
Absolutely. It's holistic. You can't just think your way to emotional intelligence. You have to feel your way there too, engaging the body, understanding the thoughts, and acknowledging the past.
Okay, good foundation. So we know emotions are these powerful biological signals from body, thought, and past. Now, the source transitions into the EQ framework, these 5 core pillars.
Right. And it promises, stories, tools, insights for each one. It's about making EQ tangible.
Let's start with pillar 1, self-awareness, the mirror of the mind. The core idea seems to be knowing what you feel while you're feeling it.
That's it, exactly. It sounds simple, but it's profound. You can't manage something if you don't even notice it's happening in real time. Self-awareness is that foundational recognition.
The source uses a story about a monk in silence for a decade to illustrate this.
Yeah, it's a great illustration. After all that quiet, he could finally distinguish between the constant mental chatter and the actual voice of his emotions. He learned to hear the difference.
So self-awareness is that ability to recognize, okay, this is anger, or this is sadness,
Yeah.
right, as it's bubbling up.
In the moment, not analyzing it days later, but catching it live, being present with your inner state without immediately reacting.
And there's a practical exercise suggested, setting emotional alarms.
A try this tool. The idea is simple. Set maybe 3 alarms on your phone, morning, midday, evening.
Okay, and when the alarm goes off,
You pause and you ask yourself some specific questions like, what emotion am I feeling right now? Be specific.
not just good or bad.
Right. Am I frustrated, hopeful, anxious? Then, where do I feel it in my body? Any physical sensations?
Connecting it back to the body.
Okay. Then what might have triggered this feeling? A thought, an event, an interaction. And finally, what belief might be attached to this? What story am I telling myself?
Those are really specific prompts, not just a vague check-in.
Exactly. Doing this regularly, the source suggests, helps rewire your emotional radar. You get better and faster at noticing and understanding your own feelings. It builds that muscle.
I like that. It's manageable. Okay, pillar 2, self-regulation. This space between trigger and reaction. That Viktor Frankl quote comes to mind immediately.
It's perfect for this, isn't it? Between stimulus and response, there is a space. That space is where our power lies, our freedom to choose.
It's the core of self-regulation, not being a slave to the initial impulse.
Precisely. And the source gives that great story of the CEO who lost the huge deal, the $10 million deal.
Right. Instead of blowing up, which you might expect.
He paused,
Yeah.
took a breath, and then asked his team, okay, what's the lesson here? That's inserting that space. That's emotional mastery in action.
Incredible response under pressure.
Yeah.
So how do we cultivate that space? The source offers techniques, right? Like the 90-second rule.
Yeah, the 90-second rule is fascinating. It's based on the biology. The actual chemical rush of an emotion in your body lasts about 90 seconds.
Only 90 seconds. So when we feel angry for like an hour,
That's often our mind keeping it going, replaying the event, adding fuel to the fire with our thoughts. The initial biological wave passes relatively quickly.
wow. So recognizing that gives you power. You realize you're not stuck in it indefinitely unless your thoughts keep it alive.
Exactly. It shows you have more control than you think. Another technique mentioned is simply labeling the emotion.
Just naming it. How does that help?
It sounds simple, but studies show that putting a name to a feeling, saying, okay, I'm feeling disappointment or this is frustration, actually reduces its intensity.
It creates distance, allows you to observe it instead of being consumed by it.
Precisely. It shifts it from this big, scary, amorphous thing to something identifiable and therefore more manageable. And the third technique is movement.
Using the body again, like shaking it out, walking.
Yep. Because emotions live in the body, moving your body can help move the emotional energy. Release that tension. Don't underestimate physical release.
It makes sense. Fight or flight involves physical readiness.
Yeah.
Movement helps discharge that.
Exactly. And the final thought on this pillar is so important. You are not your anger. You are the one observing it.
That's separation. The feeling is temporary.
Wow.
The observer self is constant. That's freeing.
Hugely freeing. Okay, pillar 3, motivation. Fuel from within. This feels a bit different, not just about control, but direction.
Yeah, it's not just about slamming the brakes on negative feelings, but also about steering the car, right? Using emotions to move forward.
Exactly. EQ involves directing emotional energy purposefully. And the emphasis here is on internal motivation, that drive that comes from inside, not just external rewards or pressures.
The source uses that old parable, the donkey and the well,
It does. It's such a great metaphor for resilience. The donkey falls in, people start burying it.
thinking it's a lost cause.
But every time dirt lands on its back, the donkey shakes it off and steps up on the pile. It uses the very thing meant to bury it as a way to rise.
Wow. Using adversity as a platform, that's powerful.
It perfectly illustrates using inner drive to turn negative situations around. And the source suggests practical ways to do this.
Like using difficult emotions as fuel.
Yeah. channeling heartbreak into creativity, or anger into focused action towards a goal, or sadness into deeper empathy. It's about transmutation.
Emotional alchemy, turning lead into gold.
Kind of, yeah. And also using visualization, really feeling the positive emotions of achieving a future goal, letting that pull you forward through tough times.
So using emotion not just to cope, but to propel. Okay, pillar 4, empathy. The power to understand without judging. This seems critical for connection.
Absolutely crucial. And the source makes a key distinction. Empathy isn't saying, I know exactly how you feel. That can sometimes shut people down.
Right, 'cause you probably don't know exactly.
Exactly. True empathy, as presented here, is about being with someone in their feeling, offering presence, understanding, without needing to fix it or give advice immediately.
Just being there. The source tells that story of the man sitting with the crying boy.
Yes, it's so simple but profound. He doesn't say much, just sits there. When the boy asks why, he says, I just wanted to sit here and feel with you. That's empathy.
Wow. Just offering compassionate presence, not trying to cheer him up or solve anything.
That's the core of it. And there are tools suggested for building this muscle, like mirroring back feelings.
How does that work?
It's reflecting what you hear them saying or sensing their feelings. So it sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed right now, or I hear a lot of frustration in your voice. It validates their experience.
Makes them feel heard. Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Asking questions instead of giving advice. Open-ended questions that help them explore their feelings rather than you jumping in with solutions.
Empowering them to find their own answers. I like that.
Also, interestingly, reading fiction. Studies apparently show it boosts empathy because you're constantly stepping into other characters' emotional worlds.
Huh. That's fascinating. You're practicing perspective taking.
Right. And finally, just observing people without judgment. Paying attention to body language, tone, expressions, trying to understand their state without labeling it immediately, cultivating curiosity.
Okay, that makes sense. Building the observational skill. Now, the 5th and final pillar. Social skill. Influence without force. This sounds like EQ in action.
That's a great way to put it. It's taking all the other pillars, self-awareness, regulation, motivation, empathy, and applying them effectively in interactions. Leadership, connection, navigating social dynamics.
The source shares a story about a teacher and a disruptive student.
Yes. Instead of just discipline, the teacher uses empathy and curiosity.
Huh?
Asks the boy what's wrong, finds out his father was just jailed.
Understanding the reason behind the behavior.
Exactly. And that understanding allowed for a compassionate, effective response, not just punishment. It transformed the situation. That's high social skill.
Powerful example. And the source outlines specific skills under this umbrella.
It does. Conflict resolution is one. Using phrases like, help me understand your perspective. It shifts from battle to collaboration.
Opens the door instead of slamming it.
Okay. Assertiveness is another. Clearly stating your feelings and needs without aggression. The template given is helpful. I feel when it happens, can we try instead?
Clear, direct, respectful, not blaming.
Right. Then there's active listening. The suggestion of like a 70-30 split, 70% listening, 30% talking, really focusing on understanding the other person.
Prioritizing understanding over being understood. That's hard but crucial.
Definitely. And finally, giving feedback effectively. The sandwich method is mentioned praise, then the critique, then hope or encouragement. Softens the blow, makes it easier to hear.
A structured way to offer constructive criticism. Okay, that covers the 5 pillars. Now, the source goes deeper into healing unprocessed emotions.
Yes, this connects back to the idea that our past really shapes our present reactions. Often, big adult reactions are rooted in old, unhealed stuff.
Like the example of the woman overreacting to the delayed text message.
Exactly. On the surface, it seems like an overreaction. But the source suggests it might be triggering deep, old childhood fears of abandonment. The text isn't the real issue. It's just poked an old wound.
So our present reactions are often echoes of the past. Icebergs, with most of the mass hidden underwater.
That's a great analogy. And to deal with that hidden mass, the source suggests inner emotional work. Things like inner child meditation.
Yeah, connecting with your younger self, asking, what did I need back then that I didn't get? And trying to offer that compassion to yourself now.
It's like becoming your own loving parent. And also trauma work, revisiting painful memories, but with compassion and safety this time. Not reliving the trauma, but processing it with new resources.
Gently integrating those difficult experiences. And emotional reparenting.
Which is kind of an ongoing process of giving yourself the support, validation, and guidance you might have missed as a kid. actively meeting those needs now.
That sounds incredibly powerful, potentially life-changing. Now, what about toxic positivity? The source tackles that too.
Oh, yeah, this is important. It warns against that pressure to just be happy all the time. Phrases like, don't cry, look on the bright side, you're too sensitive. They can be really invalidating.
Because they deny the reality of the person's feeling. They imply certain emotions are bad or unacceptable.
Exactly. True emotional mastery isn't about avoiding negative emotions. It's about processing them with wisdom. It's okay to feel sad, angry, lonely.
It's about allowing the full spectrum, validating the need to cry or feel rage safely, or sit with loneliness to see what it teaches.
Precisely. Granting yourself permission to be human, basically, not forcing a fake smile.
That's a relief to hear, honestly. Okay, let's talk final tools and daily rituals, more practical stuff.
Yeah, sustainable habits, like emotional journaling. The suggestion is interesting, writing letters to your emotions.
Like dear anger.
Yeah. Let it speak without censorship. Just get it out on paper. It externalizes it, makes it easier to understand.
Gives it a voice.
Okay.
And the RAIN technique.
It's an acronym for navigating difficult emotions in the moment. R, recognize what you're feeling.
R, allow it to be there. Don't fight it.
I, investigate. Where is it in the body? What's it feel like? Get curious.
N, nurture. Offer yourself kindness, compassion through the feeling, like being a good friend to yourself.
Exactly. It's a mindful, compassionate approach. Then there are emotional anchors.
What are those? Like grounding techniques.
Sort of. 3 reliable habits you cultivate to help you feel grounded when things get rough. Maybe specific music, time in nature, calling a safe person. Your personal go-tos for stability.
Like emotional life rafts. Good idea. And daily check-ins.
Just brief moments to ask yourself, what am I really feeling underneath? What's driving it? What do I need right now? Keeps you connected to your inner world.
Proactive self-care. And the overall goal isn't to stop feeling.
No, it's to feel fully, understand deeply, and own your emotional experience. That, the source says, is what makes you unbreakable.
Not unbreakable like hard and rigid, but resilient. Able to respond wisely, lead with empathy, love without fear.
Exactly. Embracing the full, messy, beautiful reality of being human.
Okay, now the source pushes us even further. Beyond management into transformation.
Yeah.
Expanding your soul, it says.
Yeah, this is where it gets really deep. Moving past just coping towards genuine growth and enrichment through our emotional lives.
It points out that high IQ doesn't help much with those late-night struggles, does it? Loneliness, grief, shame.
Right. Logic and intellect have their limits when facing the deep stuff, the existential stuff. That's where EQ, or maybe even emotional wisdom, becomes essential.
Exploring that deeper terrain, the unseen emotional architecture. Let's talk about the emotional timeline, childhood to now. We start out open, right?
Totally. Little kids are emotionally raw and honest. They cry, laugh, rage. It just comes out, unfiltered.
But then society, family, culture, they teach us to filter with phrases like, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah. Or big boys don't cry, don't be dramatic. Those messages, repeated over time, can actually rewire our nervous system.
How so?
They teach us to disconnect from our true feelings, to suppress what's unacceptable, to numb out.
And that leads to situations like the CEO story. Successful on the outside, but unable to admit loneliness even to his wife.
Exactly. He learned vulnerability was weakness, so he built walls. Achieved externally, but starved emotionally inside.
Which brings us to that tragic paradox. The source mentions so connected technologically, yet often so emotionally isolated.
It highlights the desperate need for genuine emotional connection, first with ourselves, then with others, which requires vulnerability.
Okay, let's shift to leadership again, the myth of logic, challenging the idea that leaders should be purely rational.
Right. Because while logic is important, great leaders often connect on an emotional level. Think Steve Jobs and Apple.
They weren't just selling computers, were they? They sold a feeling, elegance, rebellion, creativity.
Precisely. They tapped into emotional desires. Same with MLK's I Have a Dream speech. It wasn't just logical arguments. It was pure emotional power, vision, hope.
Or Elon Musk's vision for Mars, it captures the imagination and emotional pull.
Exactly. The source says leadership is emotional transmission. You have to feel it to transmit it authentically. You can't lead from a suppressed place.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
You can't inspire passion if you're numb. Now, relationships, the unspoken dialogue.
This is huge. So much communication in relationships is nonverbal. Tone, silence, eyes, energy, those tiny facial expressions.
Now, micro expressions, like when someone says, I'm fine, but everything else screams they're not fine.
Exactly. If you only listen to the words, you miss the real message, the emotional truth underneath.
So we need to learn to listen with your whole nervous system, tune into those subtle cues.
Yeah, to sense the unspoken. And the source gives that great tip for conflict. I sense there's more underneath. Do you feel safe enough to share it with me?
Wow, that's gentle, inviting, validating, creates safety for honesty.
It really can open things up. Okay, now the flip side. The cost of emotional repression. What happens when we don't process our feelings? Well, they don't just vanish. Repressed anger might become passive aggression. Sadness might turn into chronic fatigue or cynicism. Fear might become controlling behavior.
They morph into something else, often less healthy.
Yeah. The story of Tom, the guy who lost his job and got depressed but couldn't talk about it.
Until his son asked if he'd ever smile again. That broke through.
Right. It made him realize his suppressed pain wasn't just hurting him, it was affecting his son. The source puts it starkly. If you don't transform your pain, you will transmit it.
Oof, that's heavy. Our unhealed stuff impacts others. Okay, so let's clarify. Emotional honesty versus emotional control. Mastery isn't numbness.
Definitely not. It's about being honest about what you feel without letting the feeling hijack you. Acknowledging it without being overwhelmed.
So if you feel jealous, for instance,
Honesty means admitting, okay, I'm feeling jealous. Then maybe exploring why. This connects to my need to feel seen or valued. Understanding it, rather than attacking the other person or pretending you don't care.
using the emotion as data about yourself. Got it. What about when emotions clash with our identity, like I'm a positive person, I shouldn't feel sad?
That's a common trap. We reject feelings that don't fit our self-image. But the source reminds us all emotions are human. Even the Buddha cried.
So accepting the full spectrum is key. The source warns against spiritual bypassing here too.
Yeah, using spirituality to avoid difficult feelings like it's all good when you're actually really hurting inside.
Right.
True growth means facing the discomfort, not bypassing it.
Being real even when it's messy. Okay, let's get practical again. The emotional gym, building strength.
I love this analogy. Emotions as trainable muscles. And the source gives a workout, the 5x5 emotional workout, 5 exercises, 5 minutes each, daily.
Okay, break it down. First is feel.
Yep. 5 minutes just naming emotions present, no filter. Second, write. Journal about one emotional moment from the day. Reflect on your reaction.
Third, breathe. 5 minutes of focused breath work to calm the nervous system.
Fourth, connect. Share one authentic feeling with someone you trust. Vulnerability practice.
And fifth, reflect. Ask, what lesson did this emotion try to teach me today?
Doing that 5x5 daily for, say, 30 days, the source suggests, builds serious emotional muscle and awareness.
Sounds like a solid routine.
Yeah.
Now, sensitive topic, trauma, triggers, and emotional landmines. Acknowledging past wounds.
Yeah, recognizing that many intense present reactions are triggers old wounds getting poked, like the college girl panicking over delayed texts because of childhood abandonment issues.
The current event isn't the whole story, it's activating something old and unresolved.
Exactly. The source offers a healing tip for when you're triggered. Pause and ask, what's the oldest memory that feels similar to this moment?
Trying to trace the reaction back to its roots, that can be really insightful.
It can help you understand why the reaction is so intense and separate the past from the present. Okay, finally, shame. Described as the emotion that silently kills.
Why is it considered so toxic?
Because unlike guilt, I did something bad, shame is about identity. I am bad. It attacks your core self-worth. It makes you want to hide.
Like the story of the gay man internalizing shame for 25 years in a conservative town. It isolated him, forced him to live inauthentically.
Terribly isolating.
Yeah.
So emotional mastery must include healing shame, finding safe spaces internal and external for radical self-acceptance, where you're valued just for being you.
That feels like crucial healing work. Okay, wrapping up, the idea of building emotional wealth, contrasting it with financial wealth.
Yeah, society chases money, but emotional wealth, the inner richness is rarer and maybe more valuable, defined by abilities like
Staying calm under pressure, communicating kindly, holding space for others, walking away from toxicity with dignity.
crying without shame, laughing without guilt, loving without fear. Those are signs of true inner wealth.
Powerful qualities. The source then asks us to imagine a world that valued EQ, like IQ, in schools, in work.
What would that look like? How would it change things if emotional fluency was a core value? It's a provocative thought.
And it ends by speaking directly to you, the listener, asking you to pause, breathe, notice a lingering emotion.
And instead of pushing it away, turn towards it with curiosity. What's its story? What happens if you just listen?
Because stopping the fear of feeling, embracing the whole spectrum, speaking your truth.
That's where wholeness comes from. That's what makes you, in deep sense, unstoppable. Not immune to life, but resiliently engaged with it.
Absolutely. And now the final piece, taking this from insight to action,
Yeah.
an interactive challenge.
Right, because listening is great, but doing is where transformation happens.
So we're leaving you with this challenge, the Mirror of Mastery, a 7-day journey with 3 layers.
Layer 1, the emotional inventory. Do this daily, maybe 10 minutes in the evening.
Step 1, sit still, breathe. Step 2, reflect what emotion was strongest today. How did I react? Was that empowering or automatic?
Step 3, journal it, unfiltered. Just get it down. This helps deprogram old patterns, boosts awareness.
Okay. Layer 2, radical expression. Do this 3 times during the week.
Pick 3 people. Can't include yourself in the mirror. Speak one truth to each that you've been avoiding.
Could be a fear, I'm scared I'm not enough. A longing, I miss connecting with you. A past hurt, I felt hurt when. Or appreciation, I admire your strength.
Use your voice. It's healing for you, potentially for them too. Builds authenticity.
Got it. And layer 3, emotional reversal. Do this once during the week when you notice you're triggered.
Step 1, recognize the trigger. Anger, anxiety, defensiveness. Step 2, pause. Breathe. Create that space. Don't react automatically.
Step 3, ask yourself, what is this emotion here to teach me? Listen for the insight.
Step 4, journal the answer. Maybe it reveals an unmet need, a fear, a desire for validation. This turns triggers into teachers, pain into power. Emotional alchemy.
So the challenge recap. Daily emotional inventory, 3x radical expression, 1 emotional reversal. That's the roadmap.
And remember, information without action is noise. Reflection without integration is delay.
True mastery isn't perfection. It's being real, choosing to feel, sitting with discomfort, telling your story.
So don't just go back to scrolling. Pause now. Breathe. Write 1 insight. Name 1 truth to speak. Identify 1 trigger. Do 1 small thing differently today or tomorrow.
Feel what you feel. Choose your response. And if you hesitate,
Remind yourself, I am here to master emotions, not suppress them.
feeling deeply makes me powerful, not weak.
My emotions are messengers, my compass, my teachers.
You are not broken. You are unfolding.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into emotional intelligence. We hope it's offered you valuable tools and perspectives.
Remember, choosing emotional mastery rewrites your story, your legacy.
Until next time, stay conscious, stay courageous.
And above all, stay human.